Hello, friends. We are going to jump into some education about macronutrients. Whether you have learned about macronutrients before, that's great. This might just be a quick review, or you might learn something new. We'll find out. So I am sharing today about what are macronutrients, why should we care, and how to identify them. Your task coming up this week is to be able to identify your macronutrients and what you're eating. So I just want to go over just like a really brief overview of what are macronutrients. So all food that we consume can be broken down into these three main components. And that is based on their chemical structure. So however the food is made up, like whatever molecules make up the food, that is what determines whether they are a protein, a fat, or a carbohydrate. So the three like big categories are protein, fat, carbohydrate. And they each have different building blocks. So you can imagine like a whole thing is like a Lego structure, right? And then whatever it's made up of are the individual little Legos that make that structure. So for protein, so you're thinking about like if you were to eat a chicken breast or bacon or a hamburger, anything that is made up of protein, when it goes through the digestive system, it's broken down from that whole, like a whole chicken breast, into its little tiny parts, which are amino acids. And then now they are those individual Legos again that we can then piece back together, and that forms muscle tissue and provides function and growth in our bodies. So protein is literally the structure that makes up our bodies. And you can think about those little Legos, right? So you eat some chicken breast, it's broken down into the little individual pieces of amino acids, and then it literally forms the structure of your body. So your muscles, your function, your movement, all of that comes from protein. And without protein, your body is like nothingness. Does that make sense? So, amino acids are those little building blocks. Something to think about is animals are a complete source of protein, animal protein. So, meat, fish, eggs. And by complete source of protein, it means that they contain all 20 amino acids. There's 20 different amino acids. And if you don't eat meat products and you eat plant products only, plants also contain protein, but they are an incomplete source of protein. So they might have, 5 of the amino acids, but a different plant might have 5 of the amino acids. And so there's complementary proteins. And so something like rice and beans are a complementary protein. So the amino acids that rice has is different than the amino acids that beans have. So when they come together, they can form a complete protein. Hopefully that makes sense. Which is really interesting in a lot of cultures that have long living people in their society. A lot of these cultures naturally eat some of these foods. Like Mexican culture often has rice and beans as a complementary, right? They always go together in a meal, and you might think like, why? Like, I wonder how that came about, but somehow they knew, biologically they knew that those are complementary proteins, and so they go together and they support one another. And so that's just something to think about, that if you do follow a vegan or vegetarian diet, you have to eat a wide variety of plants in order to get each of those amino acids into your diet. And we don't necessarily know like which specific amino acid. I mean, you could totally look it up, but I don't think vegan and vegetarian people are daily going, okay, I'm going to eat this, check that amino acid. I'm going to eat this, check that amino acid, right? You can't really keep track of those. But what you do want to do is just eat a wide variety of plants. It's a great ballpark is to eat 30 different plants in a week to know that you're getting the variety that you need for your gut health. Okay, kind of off track. Back to fats. So fats, when you consume them, are broken down into fatty acids. That's the building block. That's the individual Lego. And then those building blocks are used as a backup energy source. And so if you do not have enough carbohydrates for energy, then your body will start to use fat stores for energy. Fats are super important in hormone production, nutrient absorption, and they protect your organs. And nutrient absorption is an interesting one. There are water soluble vitamins and there are fat soluble vitamins. And so that means that like if you didn't have enough fat in your diet and you ate foods high in vitamin A, E, K, D, your body would not be able to absorb them. So it would be pointless to consume those foods that are giving you those vitamins if your body can't absorb it because it doesn't have fat as the carrier to be able to absorb it. So it's super important that we have fat in our diet. I know sometimes people think like, oh, fat means I will gain fat. And that's not necessarily true. So you want to have, you need to have fat in your diet. It's also great for brain and eye health, um, as well as, like I said, that hormone production, super important. We want our body to function properly. We need to have fat in our diet. Fats come from things like dairy products, cheese, the fat that's in meat. So like when we consume meat, it's not, fully protein. There's also fat in there. And things like olive oil, vegetable oil, nuts have healthy fats, avocado, hummus. Those are all good sources of fat. Okay. And then last but not least, carbohydrates is our third macronutrient. So when we consume carbohydrates, they are broken down into the building block of glucose. Glucose is used for immediate energy and it's saved later in the liver and muscles for stored up energy for later on. Carbohydrates are the basic unit of all life. Carbohydrates are used for energy in everything. And you can think about like it's the basic component of all plants and grains. And we use those first for energy. And then if there's not enough carbohydrate, our body will use fat. And if there's not enough carbohydrates or fat, our body will use protein. We do not want our body to have to use protein because that means it is breaking down that structure and function of our body, the part that holds our body together. So that would be like red alert. We do not want our body to use protein for energy. We need carbohydrates and fat to be available. Okay, why do we care about all of this? What you eat literally makes up your body. So when you think about those Legos being broken down into individual Legos and then being formed back together to form the parts of your body, the food you put in your mouth is what your body becomes. So it's important to know what we're eating. It's important to have knowledge that informs our decisions. And then we need to make sure that we find a balance of the right macronutrients in our diet so that our body is composed of what we want it to be composed of. Okay, so being able to identify macronutrients. You don't need to get super deep into the science of all of this. Oh, let me pause and figure out why this photo is not showing. Interesting. Okay, well, pause. Okay, so this is a really good visual of how we can identify and categorize our macronutrients. So anything that you eat that is a fruit, grain, like what you think of as a simple carbohydrate, a piece of bread, pasta, potatoes, and then fruits and vegetables are carbohydrates. Okay. And then we think about things like these peas, beans, and lentils, and they kind of overlap because they are a carbohydrate that has protein. And so rice, beans, peas, lentils, they are a carbohydrate with protein. So that's why I love this image. And then things that we think about that are protein, we've got chicken, beef, oysters, clams, lamb, ham, fish. And then some of that overlaps with fat, right? Like obviously there's some fattier types of protein that contain more fat than others. Even just like the difference between a chicken breast and a chicken thigh, there's more fat in a chicken thigh. So that kind of like overlaps in the fat category. Fats, cheese, milk. I don't know what these things are supposed to be, but nuts. Those are protein containing fats, right? So cheese has protein in it. It is mostly categorized as a healthy fat. And then things that are like strictly healthy fats, oils, olives, avocado, and things like hummus. So, and nuts and seeds. Beautiful. Okay. So when you are identifying your macronutrients this week, you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to like have it figured out. And obviously there's overlap, right? And so you don't have to like figure out how to be like, which one is it? It's totally fine. So like, let's say you were eating, oh, are all my images going to do this? Okay, well, be right back. All right, so say you were eating this bowl for lunch or something, right? We've got tomato, cucumber, chickpea, blueberry, hard-boiled egg or soft-boiled egg, and avocado and spinach. And then it looks like some kind of like maybe seeds off to the side. So if you're writing this down in your notebook, you're gonna write all of those foods down, and then you're gonna just like put right next to the chickpeas an F for fat or P for protein or PF. It's a protein and fat. Great. Cucumber, tomato, blueberry, all carbohydrates. Spinach, all carbohydrates. Okay. And then egg, P for protein, and avocado, F for fat. That's it. Super simple and doesn't have to be perfect. Like there's obviously overlap with some of them, and that's totally fine. Okay. And then let's say you're having steak, asparagus, and potato for dinner one night, which looks amazing. Steak, you're going to label as protein, potato, carbohydrate, asparagus, carbohydrate. Simple. Okay. And then let's say you're having like a spaghetti, shrimp spaghetti, broccolini. Okay. You've got pasta, broccoli, tomato, and tomato sauce, all carbohydrate. Shrimp, protein. Label it a P. Perfect. Now, something that I want to go back on touch on is like in this image of macronutrients, you don't see a lot of green vegetables, right? And the reason being, green vegetables are a carbohydrate because they're not a protein or a fat, right? But they're not a carbohydrate in the sense of like what we think of as carbs. And when you look at the chemical compound of the chemical composition of vegetables, they are mostly water. Green vegetables are mostly made of water. And so like spinach, broccoli, zucchini, all of those, they contain such minimal carbohydrates. It's like 1 to 2 grams of carbohydrates. It's hardly anything. That it's like, yeah, technically they're a carb, but they're not made of much carbohydrate. They are water, essentially. Does that make sense? So don't overthink it when you're like, oh, how is pasta and spinach both a carbohydrate? Like you're like, okay, that's not really what I think of when I think of carbs. But in terms of macronutrients, falling into either carbohydrate, protein, or fat categories, vegetables are carbohydrates. So for now, keep it simple. That's what we'll label them. Good luck recording your food this week.